Hey everybody, welcome to Swing Batter, hosted by BadderSports. Buy high, sell low. Dad, speaking of buying high and selling low, who do you have for us today?
Well, I have a great career to talk about with a pitcher named Jake Arrieta. And he pitched in the years they're most interested in. It started with the Cubs in 2013. Prior to that, he just pitched a couple of years with Baltimore, but that's when he pitched during that decade.
Good old Jake. For those that don't recall, he was mostly remembered for a wonderful beard and paying for the Cubs. The Cubs loved this guy. They loved him deep down to their heart, their soul, and they really had a lot of admiration for his pitching style, and they were very sad to see him go. So why don't we go over the how we got here fiasco with him at the Cubs. What do you have for us for stats there?
Well, when Jake Arrieta got on the Cubs, he was just a phenomenal pitcher, one of the best pitchers in the National League. 2014 is when he really became a regular in the rotation. He pitched 25 games, 196 innings. His ERA was only .253. He took 2 no-hitters into the 7th and 8th innings and finished 9th in Cy Young. Really good year for him. And 2015, though, became his banner year. Now, when you're a great pitcher in the city of Chicago with a national television network broadcasting you around the country, and they don't usually have great stars. When they get one, everyone knows about it. And that was Jake in 2015. He was the first pitcher that year to win 15 games. 10 days after that, he pitched a no-hitter against the Dodgers. After the All-Star game, from the end of the All-Star game to the end of the year, Jake only gave up 9 earned runs. He finished 22-6 with a 177 earned run average. Won the Cy Young Award and finished 6th in the MVP. Followed that up in 2016. Of course, you can't follow up a year as great as that, but he was really good. They upped his salary to almost $11 million. He pitched another no-hitter. He finished the year 18-8 with his earned run average was now .310, but he only allowed 6.94, 7 hits for every 9 innings he pitched. So it wasn't as great as the year before, but he's still a first-class pitcher. He then agreed to $15 million one-year contract, and his innings dropped. He led the league in wild pitches. He hit 10 batters. He finished only 14-10. But because of the 2 prior years, he declined a $17 million offer from the Cubs to go into free agency. And that's what we want to talk about.
How old was he when he decided to declare for free agency, as you would say?
I have that.
He was going to be 31 years old.
Now I have a question for you. Being that I'm not a sports manager, although we can bring one on to kind of talk to him about this, once your player gets to 31, do they all go out for cigars? And then sitting there smoking a cigar, do they say, this is your chance. This is the chance you have of cashing in on the lottery. Doing these one-year deals is just not where it's at. Let's go get as much money as possible because this is it. This is the last chance you'll have. Now, granted, we have some 40-year-olds still pitching today that would argue against that, or sitting on the bench, if you will, that would argue against this idea. But if you're a sports agent, is that the conversation? Because it seems to be the theme of a lot of our swing batter.
No doubt.
You want to hear who else was interested in Arrieta before he finally went where he did? Because I got that for you.
May I guess?
Yeah.
I don't know who it is, but I'm always guessing the Mets.
The Mets are not on the list.
Oh, missed it again.
These teams will surprise you because they're not our usual list of big spenders. The Milwaukee Brewers were interested. They were in the market. They wanted a frontline starter to boost their rotation. They were sniffing around, but they were hesitant because Arrieta wanted more of a long-term deal. And at 31 years old, it wasn't something that they really were looking to do. But, you know, he had avoided arbitration and, you know, gone to arbitration. And so the Brewers kind of figured out that he had the shelf life of an iPhone model, and it was probably not going to last. And then you had the Nationals, Washington Nationals. They needed someone to bolster their rotation because they had Max Scherzer and they had Steven Strasburg, and they were rumored to be of interest at the time, but it never really materialized into anything. It was like kind of blockbuster 2010. This is not going to go well. And then the Cardinals. Cardinals were kind of lurking around. And I think what's interesting is I feel like the Cardinals and the Cubs tend to align themselves around the same players. They're geographically close. They were rumored to be interested, but ultimately they chose to pass as well. And then he signs this offer with the Phillies. That's just it's a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal for a 31-year-old. The big deal is not in the time, it's in the amount of money. So he signs this $75 million deal for 3 years. It's an average salary, $25 million a year. Yes, I took 75 and divided it by 3, Brendan. You'll be proud of me. High school math. It pays, kids. So he had a player opt-out that was available in 2019. The Phillies could void the player opt-out if they exercised options to make it a 5-year contract and extended it through 2021 and 2022. There were also what they referred to as an escalator, according to our friends at Spot Track, that was available based on starts. So if he hit a certain number of starts and where he finished in the Cy Young voting, he could have added $10 million in 21 and another $10 million in 22. So he potentially could have gone up to $45 million for the year in 2022 if they retained him for that. Plus, if he was traded, he got paid a $1 million trade assignment bonus. So all that was in there, but it wasn't evenly spaced out. He was paid $30 million in year 1, then $25 million in year 2, and ostensibly was going to get $20 million in year 3. But year 3 was 2020 during COVID when all the salaries got negotiated and kind of got, went a little screwy. So he ended up getting $7.4 million that year.
It is crazy to me that there are 2 teams that wanted him within the division. And it's interesting because a lot of these contracts that we talk about are GM signing players that hurt them within their division. And then they sign them excitably, hoping that they get something. Now, this did not happen. They went to the Phillies, but still National League team. And the Nationals would have been very interesting because the Nationals were trying to build that juggernaut of a team. So, Dad, we're on to how he performed with the Philadelphia Fantastic Phillies.
Well, the issue, we talked about this before. It wasn't that he was a tragedy, but the expectations we were going to get a Cy Young Award type #1 pitcher. That guy never showed up. First year he was only 10-11. ZRA was around 4. Well, that's average pitcher. The next year, same deal. He was 8-8, earned run average 4.5. It just seems to me when you look at Arrieta with the Cubs, his last 2 years were progressively worse. His second to last and then his last, and he was 31 years old. There were signs that this guy was not going to be an ace, and that is in fact exactly what happened. His third year with the Phillies was a COVID year. He only won 4 games. Earned run average now was over 5. So for a team expecting a #1 Cy Young Award pitcher, they got a pitcher who on statistics would have been a 4th or 5th starter with those kinds of numbers. Huge disappointment for all the cash outlay.
Yeah, but they're not getting 4th or 5th starter money. That's the biggest problem with a pitcher. When you invest this much into a pitcher, it's not like you're sitting there. There's another $25 million pitcher that's available. So you lost out when you picked this one, and then you have to rely on your minor leagues to fill in the gaps there. You can't miss with these. This was a big miss. There's no justifying it. I mean, I don't see anything about these stats, these figures. I mean, it just was not there. And sadly, again, he goes off into the sunset after he performs because, quite honestly, this was the end. This was the end of Jake.
Yeah, and then, well, in the second year, he had bone spurs removed from his elbow. So, not bad. And then, like, the COVID, it was kind of like, all right, well, but the ERA is a disaster. And it's not like the fans in Philly are really forgiving. And, the generous spirit that you see in the city of brotherly love for those who underperform is not really apparent all the time. So it wasn't like they were really great to him. And then, but this was the kicker. This is absolutely the kicker. The Cubs signed him in 21. They didn't sign him for the league minimum. They signed him for $6 million in 2021. $6 million. He had 20 starts. What was his ERA with the Cubs? It was 22 points above the number of the devil. It was 688. That's where his ERA was. And then they pulled the plug on him, and he ended up getting picked up, I think, for a couple starts.
Todd, I don't blame the Cubs for doing this. I mean, we've all been there. We've all broken up with somebody and then brought them back into our lives because we remember the good times. And sadly, we age a little bit, and so the good times aren't as good, or the fun times aren't as fun. So I give the Cubs grace. The Cubs had good memories. The Cubs are kind of like a worn-out couch. You sit down in it, you're like, this is comfortable. I feel good in it. So Jake kind of made everyone feel good. The Phillies, any East Coast team would not feel that good, and I bet you he got nice press. So it wasn't a bad ending to his career, but sadly
what was
it ended
like
quickly.
35, 36 years old?
We say very young, but when you're having these injuries and these type of things, I also go back to that conversation in the cigar lounge with his agent. I wonder if they had a doctor there as well and was like, listen, there's some things going on with your arm. You need to get this a really good deal here.
I don't even know medically what bone spurs are or what they do, but it sounds horrid. If you have like spurs of bone in your elbow, like floating around, nothing about that's good. It can't be.
Well, they certainly had things floating around in that turf back in the day as well. So,
yeah.
So to wrap this up into a nice bow, Jake had a great young career, and he should be remembered for the no-hitters and all of the things that he brought to the Cubs. When you sign a deal of this size and you don't deliver, this is what you kind of get remembered for. Does he have a shot at the Hall of Fame? Absolutely not. Does he have really good numbers at a really good time? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, this is a swing batter contract. They bought high, and they sold low. I'm your host, Brendan. That's Todd, and that's Stat. Thanks all.